Welcome back, everyone. I have Dr. David Morehouse again. We're going to talk about I think, a fairly intriguing topic. Earlier this week, there was actually a congressional panel on the UAP program. I think it was May 17th, and today is May 19th. We're recording. In kind of independent of that, but related, as part of the remote viewing program, there was something called extended remote viewing, and there was a process that sometimes remote viewers would go off-world and explore off-world targets that sometimes led to the realization that we're not the only ones in the universe. So, and David, could you talk a little bit more about what you mean by off-world, kind of the off-world historical record and things like that, and what that meant?
Sure. I guess first to discuss why and who would initiate something like this.
Yeah.
Program managers were kind of the supreme rulers of those of the unit. And so if program managers had interest in UFOs or alien life, and put yourself in that place, if you had interest in those kinds of things and you had a bunch of remote viewers.
But you need an excuse, though. You need like an official rationale to use government resources.
Not necessarily. And I can't say whether there was or there wasn't. I don't know. And I would not put it past somebody to just make the decision that I think I'm going to start doing this. I mean, that could happen. I mean, you have no way of knowing whether this was an official task or not.
Or just somebody's morbid curiosity.
Precisely. And I mean, I don't think that happened a lot, but I think that anybody that had that kind of an interest, who had this military intelligence collection tool sitting in the office in front of them every day, if they didn't have some other operational target they're working at the present time, why not? I mean,
if you had spare capacity, you might as well use it.
Yeah. I mean, every day we went in there, we were not working operational targets. Now, if you weren't working operational targets, which you don't know if you're working or not, you look on the board and it says, Morehouse room 1 or whatever it was, and at from 1300 to 1500. So okay, I've got a session going on that time, and it might say monitored, it might say solo. I was very quick to just go to solo. I didn't want people talking to me while I was doing it. Mm-hmm. So that was how you found out. Now, you could go into the program manager, knock on the door and say, hey, what's up? What am I, anything you want me to know before I start or anything else? If it was a double blind and he knew nothing, he would say double blind. I have no idea. If it was blind, meaning I was going to be blind and he knew, he might say nothing again. He would never say anything to front load you. Like, oh, well, make sure you take some mittens in. This is going to be cold. Say something like that. You would never say anything to, he might just say, well, how are you feeling today? Okay. All right. You tired? No. Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, you've been doing well on your targets. I looked at your work, calibrating you, and you're kind of on the upswing. So yeah, let's do some challenging things. Okay. Yeah. Yes, sir. You go back over and, you get ready for your time when it's your time. Now, how did I know that these were, off-planet targets? And this is how you know that. You end up being given a coordinate that is slightly different. It seems to have like an older format. Like when we do coordinates in training now, for me at my company, we do 2023, and it will do the month, and then it'll always be 01. Why? Because we want to end the last digit of 1 because it facilitates an ideogram. But these did not look like that all the time. And they were old. If you saw the target folders, they were old, dog-eared, and they were thick, most of them. So I don't know where this process began. Excuse me. Exactly. But I know that I started working targets. And the first one that was done was the moon. So you start describing, moonscapes and other things, but you, as a remote viewer, are trained not to. You're trained to forget the name of what it is you're looking at. Your job is to dissect everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, you don't go. You might say AOL moon. I go back to who decided to do this. It could have been any one of the program managers, but I do know that on multiple occasions, which is how I discovered this, I was being given off planet targets. I know this because the feedback was being provided as an off planet target. So when I would do a session and my first one that they gave me to was one of the lunar landing sites. So, the platform that stayed behind, et cetera, et cetera. There was one of the targets that I was asked to do that Gabrielle had me doing, on which was one that I saw an astronaut. I sketched an astronaut form laying on its back, feet up. I did not know what that was, and I declared it as AOL. And in the analysis of the target, I was told that it was AOL and it was not target data, because there were no astronauts laying on their back. They were all standing up doing what they did, and I was looking at a site that was now vacant. Right. I described, the angularity of certain things, escape, the terrain, the soil, feeling the textures, etc. And after it was all over, the feedback to me was a lunar landing site. It was one of the last lunar landing sites. I don't know what Apollo mission that was. And my feedback was, a photograph, a copy of a photograph of that site, which I thought that was a good session, as did Gabi. And I thought, well, great. You're extending the boundaries. I'm not just looking at stuff on the planet. I'm now looking at other stuff. To just continue that part of the story and then jump back to other planet targets. Some 40 years later from that session, I find that there is actually an astronaut at the place where I saw it, and it is called the Fallen Astronaut. Are you familiar with that?
No.
There is a sculpture that was left on the at the landing site there, and that last one. Hold on, let me pull it up here. Oh yeah, there we go. Stanislav Sulawski was the sculptor. It's 3.5 inches tall. It's made out of polished aluminum. It takes the shape of an astronaut. It was left there by the mission commander next to the lunar rover with a placard that dedicated that site to all fallen astronauts, both Soviet and US. And there were lots of intangible aspects that came out of this target, like, artistic and monumental, but a lot of conflict stuff, a lot of, other things that were being attached to this site that remote viewers are capable of detecting, decoding, and objectifying, which I was clueless as to why those things were coming up. And the evaluation, not judgment, the evaluation of the session as a training session, although successful, was you got a lot of data that does not apply here, right? Going through this thing, like artistic and, and sculpture or conflict and stuff like that. So 40 years later, I find out that there is actually a sculpture there, and it was hidden by NASA because they were really pissed off because the crew are given a PPE bag, personal something,
right,
which is quite small, only allowed to put stuff they're going to carry up there, personal stuff in that bag. The rest of it is, calculated in grams for the weight load distribution, right? Because after all, you have to lift this stuff up out of the gravitational pull of the Earth and get there and then get back. So carrying, extraneous items along that are not on the manifest is a gross error and, punishable by, lots of bad talk, and you'll never do another mission again. And the mission commander who did that one, I find 40 years later, got his ass chewed, and and they carried this little statue up there, and they were kind of doing it part because they wanted to put a monument up there, but also the sculptor, who was really hoping for recognition for having done this thing actually destroyed his career because he was deported from the United States. He was deported for that, deported back to his his home country, which was Eastern Europe. I'm not sure exactly where it was. Polish. It was Poland.
Yeah, it sounded like a Polish name. Yeah.
And he was ruined here because he participated in this thing through a cutout, kind of a broker guy that was doing it. Because why? Because after they released the information that this little sculpture was up there on the moon, they had already mass produced a whole bunch of replicas of that sculpture, which of course they were going to sell. And then that all became, the catalyst for, you're out of here. They deported him. And of course, then they went and found out all the other crap that these astronauts were carrying up there. And do you know why they carry it up there? Do you know why Gus Grissom in the movie The Right Stuff, you remember the guy that was playing him, was talking about these diamonds, the roll of dimes that he was going to take up there? The reason is because the stuff is solid gold when they come back. There is an entire counterculture of people that buy space stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Gloves and helmets, and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for some of this stuff. I mean, crazy, right? And to have a replica of that spaceman, they would want that. To have the other stuff that mission commander carried up there, which was, I can't remember the exact number. It was something like 500 to 1,000 envelopes that had all been postmarked from the moon, and he carried them up there, went to the moon with them, and was going to go back and sell them. This envelope went to the moon with me on my mission, Apollo, whatever it was, right? And so when NASA found this out, that this was kind of going on, I mean, I'm sure there was a little come to whatever meeting where they dragged all these astronauts in and went, don't ever do that again, kind of a thing. But yeah, so I felt, venerated to know that my astronaut laying on its back that I saw 40 years earlier was actually there. It was part of that target. They just didn't know at the time. That made me feel good. I'm very sorry for Stanislav for having to, go back to Poland because of what happened. Anyway.
If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. Additionally, if you have any feedback, please put something in the comments below. And lastly, if you want to watch the full episode of this clip, you can find it above. Thanks again for watching.